Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to London and to what we call summer. Now, some of you probably don't know, we do have a wet season here in London. It's called Wimbledon Fortnight, and you're right in the middle of it. So don't expect it to get too much better. Now, I'm going to talk to you for the next 20 minutes or so on maritime security. It may not be as appetizing as Dr. Paternick's presentation yesterday when he explained to you the different ways of eating, but hopefully I'll introduce you to another culture without too many myths, looking at the way in which a particular area of security is exposed to the elements. And if mariners don't get it right, people die. And indeed, last week, there was a casualty of a Bahamas flagship that literally broke in half due to bad weather. And these are the realities of working at sea. However, I'm also very aware that this is one of those sessions after lunch when people are digesting their food and contemplating going to sleep. And so rather than let you do that, I'm going to walk about, and if they put the microphone on, if they don't, then I'll talk loud enough for you to be able to hear me. Okay, right. That's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to set the scene first and go through those areas. I'm not going to dwell because we haven't got much time, but that's what we're talking about. 70% of the surface of the world is covered in sea. And most of that is ungoverned because it's the high seas. The only bit that a nation actually governs is 12 miles beyond the limit of their shore, which is called their territorial waters. Okay? 95% by bulk of all trade moves by sea. Fact. The global population by 2050 is going to be 9 billion. On the 31st of October, according to the United Nations in 2011, it was 7 billion. So that's a significant increase. And the one figure that isn't shown there that is actually probably more startling than the rest is that when it was 7 billion, the middle class was 1 billion. By the time we get to 9 billion, the middle class will be 3 billion. That is a significant increase, and the vast majority of things that those people need to transfer from working class to middle class move by sea. Now, we heard yesterday that 80% of a country's GDP comes from cities. Also, 80% of the population of the world live within 100 kilometers of the sea. The sea affects almost everybody, and I think we can all name a large number of cities that sit alongside the sea. And for many of those countries that are developing, seafood is a vital source of protein. 40% of the world relies upon seafood for their main source of protein. Okay. So what is the maritime industry? It's big. There are more than 50,000 ships of over 500 gross tons plying the oceans with trade today as we speak. There are more than 520,000 people on cruise liners today, tomorrow, and every other day of the year. That's more people than there are in the air at any one time. There are more than 4,500 super yachts. A super yacht is a vessel designed specifically for pleasure that is over 33 meters in length, and 200 of those are helicopter capable. And the prestige yards for the building of super yachts are full. Okay, there's a recession on, so they're full. And the second-hand market is buoyant. Maritime industry, offshore oil and gas. At least 25% of all our oil and gas comes from offshore reserves. Now, when you look at those, that's where the proven and unproven reserves lie. Many of these countries are undeveloped. And therefore, when they go in to get these resources out, which they are going to have to, it's going to be, number one, technically challenging, and number two, more challenging from a security angle because these countries are less certain. Ports, that's Singapore. That's the busiest port in the world. There are more than 8,000 ports, and that number is increasing, and they're getting bigger. If you're a criminal, the easiest place to get hold of something is there, but either before it goes on the ship or just after it comes off. Interestingly, though, over the next 20 years, the International Chamber of Shipping have predicted that the volume of trade moving by sea is going to increase by 50%. That's 50. Is that possible? Well, over the past 30 years, decade on decade, the maritime merchant fleet has increased in size by 100%. 10 years ago, the largest container ship could carry just over 9,000 containers. Last week, Maersk had a naming ceremony for the first ship that will be able to carry 18,000 containers, and that's the first one of a fleet of 20. But whilst all of that is happening, the navies are shrinking. The Western navies are going to shrink by 30% over the next 20 years. We know that because it takes quite a while to put a ship through the whole process of being built and then going to sea, etc. And even though the navies for India, China, etc., may well be building, there is no way they can keep pace with the development and the increase in the size of the merchant fleet in order to be able to carry trade at 50% more. So therefore, there is going to be a need for private maritime security. We talked yesterday about the fact of the interface between government and private. Well, this is where it's going to happen and where it's happening now. Piracy is only one element of it, but it's a global problem. It's a tropical disease. Now, I notice I've got a little toy here, so I might as well use it. Okay, here we are. Most recent instance of piracy actually was off the coast of Peru. That was a couple of days ago. West Africa, we all know about that. The method of piracy there is they're stealing the fuel from the ships or oil from the ships. They're smash and grab. It's much more violent than it is on the East Coast. And then Bay of Bengal, there's a bit going on, and then the busiest area of the lot is around Indonesia and the Straits of Singapore. So this year, and that's a couple of days out of date, I think it's now 129 attacks have occurred. So it's tropical disease, it's happening all the time. But that isn't the only thing that happens at sea, obviously. There are all these other areas. And terrorism is the worst case. Now in 1961, 61 that is, this ship, which was the Santa Maria, was taken by a group of Portuguese and Spanish dissidents because both of their countries were under dictators, Salazar in the case of Portugal and Franco in the case of Spain. And they were upset about this, and so they decided to take a cruise liner. She was escorted by the United States Navy just off Venezuela and taken into American port where it was all sorted. That was really the first time that terrorism happened at sea. Now, those of you will probably, many of you will probably remember the incident in Aden in 2000. And it is ironic that whilst the most sophisticated navy in the world had what was called an Arleigh Burke destroyer, which was cutting-edge technology, with an Aegis missile system that was world-leading, was able to be defeated by a man in a rubber boat with explosives. Asymmetric war, that is what terrorism is. Mumbai, we've heard about that, and that was talked about earlier on, but actually, that just proves, and two of those cases prove, that with port security, there's a wet side and a dry side. As a Royal Marine, for me, that was almost a perfect amphibious raid. They came in undetected, moved in, got to their objectives, did what they had to. The only bit they didn't do was get out again, but I don't think they ever wanted to. But you are vulnerable from the sea, and because I'm a Marine, I always look at how I can get into something by using water. We're particularly vulnerable here with the river. And then the MV Star and the way that she was attacked, thankfully that wasn't as bad as it could have been. But guess what? Next time they'll get it right. But it's a challenging domain. The maritime domain is particularly difficult. It's shrouded in kind of mystery because it works very well that way, and the maritime industry is unlikely to change too quickly. But I was told by somebody, and this was a senior director of a big security company based in this country, that there is no difference between, or what he said was, the only difference between land security and maritime security is that the land is blue. He couldn't have been more wrong. On land, you work under a single jurisdiction. At sea, it's multiple. If I got on a ship in Singapore and went to Rotterdam, I would go through 16 jurisdictions. On land, you have a handful of stakeholders. At sea, multiple. On a 15,000 container carrying ship, there are over 14,000 different and separate business interests. On land, they're always looking for an end state, military and political. At sea, you never want that. It's commercial continuum. And the other thing is that on land, the big contracts come from governments. At sea, there are no government contracts. It's all private. And these are the main drivers, main three stakeholder groups as far as commercial shipping is concerned. At the top, you've got the shipping companies, the operators, managers, charterers, i.e. the guy that owns the box, fills the box and manages the box. You've then got the flag states, bottom left-hand corner as you're looking at it. Now, one of the interesting things is here, these are the flags, the top 10 flag states. You probably can't read that at the back there, but it says Panama is the biggest, then it goes Liberia, Marshall Islands, Hong Kong, Singapore, Bahamas, Greece, Malta, China, and Cyprus. Only one of those is a national registry. The others are open registries, which means they're commercial entities, and the flag is effectively franchised out to them. Now, what that means is that when they make decisions, they make it based on commercial imperative and not on what a country wants to do, which makes it a very different dynamic. And then the third one here is marine insurance. Every ship has to be insured. You have 5 insurances: hull and machinery, cargo, P&I, additional war risk, and then K&R. So that's it. Not one of those is a government. It's different, and it has to be dealt with in a different way. And spot the deliberate mistake there. What is SAMI? And why are we here? And what do we do? Well, the original reason was that when piracy became a real problem in 2008, the client, and I talked about who they were or are, were unable to discern good company from bad. And also the good private maritime security companies were unable to separate themselves from the not so good. And so therefore we came up with an idea to formulate a list of reputable companies so that the client could identify them more easily. Secondly, that the PMSCs would then form a guild and push standards up. We started in 2011, and that is the way that we have grown over the past couple of years. Our membership is completely global. We have 180 companies, and you won't be able to see, but 25 of the companies come from Asia. Predominantly, many of the companies do come from the United Kingdom, but the reason why we are here is not so much that. It is because London is still the heart of the shipping community. Why? Well, because Lloyd's is here, where every single ship is either insured or reinsured. The majority of the legal stuff that happens with ships is based in London, and the IMO is here, which is the International Maritime Organization. But the characteristics of SAMI, very briefly, is we're international. We have companies from 37 different countries. We're independent, we're an NGO, we're not for profit, we're impartial, and we're very integrated with industry. But the concern was when guys started going on board ships and they were armed, was that there would be a Blackwater type incident. And I can remember being in the IMO 2 years ago and being referred to as a wild-eyed, ponytailed, gun-toting mercenary. So we had to get rid of that, and we had to work our way through it. But the other thing that was absolutely evident was that off East Africa, we were actually being very successful. And this is the one that, not the last one, but the one before. The last commander of EU NAVFOR, one of the coalition forces, said that we have a 100% success rate, which is true. Not one single ship that's had armed guards on board has been taken. But all of the rules and regulations for the high seas, and also where it comes into ports, etc., is written in this place, which is just up the river. In fact, if you were to stand, if you were to go to Parliament Square, go to the river and look right, you'd be able to see this building. It's the International Maritime Organization. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations. And they have been working on 3 base or foundation documents. And going from the left there, and I know you probably won't be able to read them, the first one is the 100 series rules for the use of force that gives boundaries within which an armed guard can actually deter a pirate from coming towards the ship. The middle one is the ISO standard, the international standard for the way in which private maritime security companies must conduct themselves. And the third one is the standardized contract for the way in which you can bring the guys on board. Those are 3 excellent foundation documents. I say excellent. I know they're excellent because I was involved in writing them. There have been several other accompanying documents. BMP4, which is designed to let the shipping industry understand how to do it, and also how to make sure that the private maritime security companies conduct the negotiation for the contract properly and that they're insured correctly. There are also national countries that are bringing in their own legislation that I won't talk about again. Right, technology solutions. Inevitably, we are going to be going down the technology solution line. Shipping and technology are intertwined like 2 pieces of cord within a rope. And normally shipping goes for technology either to increase speed, increase cargo capacity, or reduce crew size. They will reduce the number of people that are coming on board because they're costly, and they'll do it by utilizing technology. And also, we had a very, very interesting presentation yesterday on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is absolutely going to be key to the maritime industry. Why? Well, because at the moment on that ship, all right, she's a bulk carrier, there will be no mechanical link between the bridge and the engine room or the steering. It's all done electronically. And at the moment, in order to keep in line with minimizing usage of fuel and keeping in line with all the environmental challenges that there are, not burning dirty fuel in certain places, she will be transmitting back to her head office a lot of information about what her engines are doing. If anybody's transmitting anything, it can be hacked. And that sets a whole load of complex problems that could happen. If we thought an aircraft going into the Twin Towers was a challenge, what would it be like if we had a liquid natural gas ship loaded with a full cargo steaming at 20 knots, because they can go up to 22 normally, in towards a terminal. Okay? And that could be done remotely. Okay, so in summary, maritime industry is crucial to the growth of global trade. Absolutely. If it wasn't there, it wouldn't happen. Maritime security is extremely complex. I've only scratched the surface, I assure you, but it is extremely complex. And that private maritime security will be absolutely pivotal in all forms of the management of maritime security. Thank you very much.